So the fact that it has the lowest unemployment in the country, because we rely so much on small businesses to provide most of the new jobs, in fact about 75% of the new jobs created are by small businesses. And the fact that it provides access to credit for those small businesses is a big part of the reason that they have such a low unemployment rate, and they're able to diversify their economy, actually. It has one of the healthiest banking systems in the U.S. So I mentioned that it's had no bank failures. But another interesting thing about it is it has the most democratized banking system in the country. That may not be the right word, it's the most decentralized actually, but I think it's most democratized because it has the most community banks per capita of any state. And the reason it has the most community banks is that the big monolithic Wells Fargo's or Chase's or BOA's don't come in and suck up all of the depositors. It's mostly community banks working with the Bank of North Dakota to make sure that community banks are doing well, who know the needs of the local people and know that they are creditworthy. And so they're able to make these judgments and get money lent out to stimulate the economy, as opposed to like what the process Chase might use, which is a checkbox form, right? Does this person have such and such assets, and you check it off, and you either make it or you don't. And most likely with the tightening credit rates, that they'll just say, nah, you're too much of a risk. Well, this is the most decentralized banking system in the country. Only stay with a budget surplus. So there again, a lot of people say that it's the oil and gas revenues, which is a big part of it, no question about it. But you look at Alaska, for instance, huge oil and gas revenues. Alaska still has an unemployment problem. So there's one thing that's consistent throughout all of these issues, and that it has its own bank. So there's a lot of states starting to look at this now. Oregon had a bill in the last legislative session which died in the House, so they weren't able to move it. But it did have, it did have the support of their state treasurer, although in a little bit modified form. Hawaii passed a bill and got it out of their House, and it died in the Senate. Actually, the big news here is that California actually passed their bill through the House and the Senate, got it to the governor's desk, Governor Jerry Brown's desk. He didn't veto it, but he returned it without his signature back to the legislature, saying he promised no new task forces. Oh, thank you. Which seems like a really lame excuse, right? But their bill was modeled after ours, actually. Ours is called the Washington Investment Trust, creating the Washington Investment Trust. Theirs is called creating the California Investment Trust. And it was to create a task force. Jerry Brown said, no new task forces, but optimists are saying that since he didn't veto it, the real message is, just send me the bill that creates this thing. I don't want to do the task force, just do it. So they're moving forward and they're just going to do it now. So the bill to create the bank, I would hopefully see come through their next legislative session. They're always in session. That's how California is. It's a full-time legislature. So, but you can see there's a lot of other interest in there, even in Idaho. President Obama had a federal infrastructure bank in his jobs bill. Unfortunately, he can't even get a hearing on that jobs bill in the Republican-controlled House. So it's not going anywhere. But a recognition of the power behind this concept. So, what would owning our own financial institution do for Washington? We could fund our own capital projects. One of the things that North Dakota also is unique about them is that they don't have a debt service line appropriation in their budget. Washington State does. In fact, our debt service line item in this most recent budget is $1.9 billion. So we're paying that money as interest to service the debt of the bonds that we sell. So in North Dakota, they don't have a debt service. Now, the money has to come from someplace. I'm not exactly clear on their process for how their capital projects are funded where they avoid the debt service, but I think it's in that the bank is providing the lending capacity for the capital projects. So the interest is just repaid through the projects, and the state must just fund the projects in their capital budget, but there's no debt service appropriation involved with it. Support small businesses and farms, I talked about that, targeting, working, the obvious things about keeping our money in our state working within our state and recirculating and multiplying and that sort of thing. One of the largest areas in the Bank of North Dakota, their largest program area was actually student loans. Because the banks had pretty much abandoned that, or the loans were just so outrageously expensive that students couldn't use them. So the federal government has taken that loan program over now, but still the federal guaranteed loans don't cover the full cost of tuition and books, plus they don't cover the cost of actually living while you're going to school. Yeah. So the Bank of North Dakota provides that kind of lending at low interest student guaranteed rates. So it helps students get through school. In fact, North Dakota has the lowest default rate on their student loans in the country. That's another first for North Dakota. It absorbs debt capacity to keep people in their homes. You saw how that worked through the Depression era. Share risk and partner with financial institutions. I talked about those participation loans in a minute. So there's an organization called Center for State Innovation that did a white paper to see what would a state bank of Washington do for our state. So their analysis, based on data from the Bank of North Dakota, because that's the only place they could get data from, really, it shows that, and they built their analysis based on $100 million of initial capitalization. So it showed that it would return a positive by year 3, but then thereafter, so we'd have to go 3 years, sucking it up. But once it gets up and running, you can see how that 100 million initial capitalization compounds down to about year 40, 743 million for that initial 100 million capitalization. If we decided to initially capitalize it with $1 billion instead of 100 million, just move the decimal point over, you can see how this starts building something that's real money for our grandchildren down the road. So, the task force is moving forward, as I mentioned, but the work is really amazingly complex in my mind. We're creating something like the Bank of America from nothing, and but we're moving forward. We've got good people working on it. One of the big issues is going to be how are we going to initially capitalize this thing. So the upcoming legislative session, we're talking about putting up a jobs bill that will require selling bonds to finance capital construction. It's a good bill. We need to create jobs right now, but we also need to think about how are we going to invest in something like this for the future. So I would submit that we really need to take a hard look at capturing some of those bond money to capitalize the bank. And, yes?
Since we have more population in our state than North Dakota, wouldn't we get a larger or faster return, or is it all prorated kind of thing?
No, it's easy to start thinking that, our economy has a lot more potential than North Dakota. Well, not really. I mean, they're a resource-based economy there, and we used to be manufacturing. I guess we're outsourcing so much work now, but we have innovation and all those things that we're trying to develop here. It's hard to compare. I mean, it is kind of like apples and oranges. We can just do a best guess, but there's no science to extrapolate the North Dakota model exactly to what it would do in Washington. So that's the best answer I can give you. Where was I? Anyway, that's just, this is more interesting. when I was back in North Dakota, the Bank of North Dakota is in Bismarck. Their philosophy is, people may want to bank with the Bank of North Dakota, but they don't market it for people at all. It's not a retail bank per se, but their philosophy is that the bank belongs to the people, so if they want to keep their money there, they certainly should be entitled to. So they have one branch. It is in Bismarck, North Dakota. If you believe in that Bank of North Dakota so strongly, you want to keep your money there, you got to go to the Bank of North Dakota in Bismarck, go up to one of their 2 teller cages that they have there and do your business. They don't have like ATMs scattered around the state or all these other services that you would expect from a full-service bank. Their primary mission is to be the state's depository of all of its tax revenues and then put it to work for the state. So they do provide some of these other services, and I don't have an internet connection here, but if you go to their website, banknd.nd.gov, they've got a great website. It even has a little historical piece on it because it is such a unique institution. But you can see all of the programs, lending programs that they have, all the treasury services they will provide for other banks or whatever, or some of these trust services. They do all of that kind of stuff to support the local banking community. In fact, they even provide administrative services for smaller community banks, which saves the smaller community banks those administrative costs because the Bank of North Dakota could use their economy of scale to provide that service to them cheaper than they could do it for themselves. Yes?
Do you accept revenue from cities and counties?
Yes.
Or just the state?
They can accept revenues from, I'm pretty sure, all of public, what do they call, political subdivisions.
Okay.
Yeah, and what the bill that we're working on, I want to keep it open to do the same thing. My goal is to emulate that model as closely as possible. There's been some talk about local governments starting their own banks, and in fact, one of my task force members, Lloyd Hara, who is the King County Assessor, in a past life, he was the treasurer for the city of Seattle. And when he was the treasurer, he tried to create a Bank of Seattle, interestingly enough. Back in the day, this was, I can't remember when this was, 70s or 80s. And he said the reason that he couldn't get it done was that the Federal Reserve refused to issue him a routing number. And they just stonewalled him. So, one of the options we're thinking of, possibly, I mean, we haven't talked about it much, but we could actually just buy a bank that's pre-existing, and along with it comes the routing number, along with it comes all of the organizational structure, then we can just hopefully scale to size.